Okay, so this is part 2 of the sight reading video. Last video, we talked about some basic things that you need to know and do, such as being able to read notes, know where your notes are at on the piano, keyboard topography, and being able to find the keys without having to look, and other things. So if you haven't checked out the first video, I'll link that down below and you can check that one out. But in this second video, we're going to talk about some things that you can practice or do in addition to make yourself a better sight reader. And in a way, this is also kind of geared towards if you're wanting to sight read as an accompanist or play for a church or a choir or something like that. So this is kind of additional things that you can do. The first thing you want to do that kind of goes along with the last video is obviously you need to practice sight reading every day. So even if you just spend a few minutes every day reading some things, you can read repertoire, you can use pedagogical books, just sight read some pieces by Martha Meir or Melody Bober. You can use sight reading books. Faber has a good series. And there's also Sight Reading and Rhythm Every Day is also a good series that you can use. Both of these are good. There are other things out there you can use as well to make your sight reading better. They're different levels, so you can use easier levels and work your way up. And a lot of times you want to be able to sight read 2 levels below your playing level so that you can be proficient to learn the music that you're at. But the goal is going to be able to sight read at your current level. So you can use these books that are leveled and work your way up to sight reading at your level. Some of the benefits to being able to sight read really well is obviously you'll be able to learn music much faster. You won't have to practice music as much because you can just look at it and read it. You'll also progress in higher levels much faster because if you can read it and play it, then you have more time to work on the technique and fine-tune the skills necessary outside of just reading the notes and rhythm. Another thing that you want to know how to do that's beneficial is to be able to read 4-part harmony. In 4-part harmony is where we have a bass, a tenor, alto, and soprano. It is easier to read 4-part harmony when it's written on the staff together, but if you ever play for a choir, you'll have each part written in its own section. So that's a little harder to sight read. So you want to practice reading 4-part harmony. There are etudes out there in 4-part harmony that you can practice it. I recommend using a hymn book. Hymn books are always written in 4-part harmony. You can get some choir pieces and practice reading 4-part harmony. The key to reading 4-part harmony really is understanding keys and chords, because those 4 parts of the harmony are basically your triads that are stacked in 4-note chords. Also, if you understand how chords work and function in a key, it makes reading 4-part harmony much easier. If you plan to ever accompany for a choir, it is a must to be able to do that and to sight read it proficiently on the spot. So you want to practice 4-part harmony. It's beneficial to do. Even if you don't plan to accompany for a choir or play for a church, reading 4-part harmony will improve your sight reading skills because it will teach you to see notes and chords and groups instead of just a note or a couple of notes at a time. That leads into the third thing. Group notes together. Don't read note by note. A lot of the time, most of the time when I sight read, I read by chords. I will see a bunch of notes coming up together and I will study them and be able to recognize very quickly, oh, that's the A major triad in its second inversion. So if you've practiced your functional skills and your technique practice to play chords in different inversions, broken and blocked and in sevenths, then it's much easier to sight read as well. So you want to group things into chords, into scales, or you can even group things as far as if you have a theme with sequences, then you already know that sequence is the same intervallic distance of the notes, you're just changing your pitches. So you want to group things together. You also want to practice reading lead sheets. Again, that'll strengthen your ability to read and understand chords and harmony. It'll also really help you with improvisation. So it's not necessarily a must to do that, but it is helpful. And you can find free lead sheets on the internet, basically anywhere. But that'll improve your improvisation skills and your sight reading because like I said in the last video, Some of your skill with a sight reader, is being a very good sight reader, is going to be the ability to improvise, or especially if you're accompanying somebody and they mess up and you're basically sight reading in their performance, then you want to be able to improvise and kind of get back around so they can kind of start over. Or if they have a memory slip, you want to improvise to be able to go back and help them start back at a place that they know and can pick back up at. So improvisation is definitely a skill you want to know, especially if you plan to become an accompanist. Improvisation will help you with sight reading, especially getting through passages too that are very thick in texture, like I mentioned in the last video. Sometimes you have to thin out that texture, and being able to improvise will help you get around that too. Next thing, this is a really big one, and this is something I make my students do. Play with a metronome, sight read with a metronome, so that you push yourself not to stop, but to keep going. You want to be able to keep going, set it at a set tempo. Sometimes sight readers will play too fast or too slow. You want to play with a metronome so that you can keep your tempo steady and you're not stopping, starting, playing fast, playing too slow, but you're able to get in a groove and stay consistent speed. You can also practice sight reading with other musicians so that it does the same thing, and you kind of learn how to, if you're accompanying people and not part of like a quartet or something like that, where you kind of have the melody sometimes. But if you're just a flat out accompanist, if you're playing, for example, accompanying a student on a very simple Suzuki piece or something, it is strictly accompaniment. You have no melody in there. You don't have a moment where you're shining as a soloist or whatever. You want to be able to maintain the tempo and the harmony. So playing with other people is going to give you practice to be able to do those things and to keep going. Even if you miss something, you'll learn to keep going and stay steady in your sight reading. It is harder to do that, so you want to make sure that you feel pretty comfortable sight reading before you work on that skill. But it's another skill that you can do to strengthen your reading and being comfortable with reading. A really big one that's important is when you look at the music, you should do ear training to do this. When you look at the music, even if you've never heard it or played it before, you should be able to look at the notes and kind of hear an idea in your mind of what it's going to sound like. Because if you can hear a piece in your mind, you're going to have an easier time reading it and playing it. And also being able to play by ear helps you with sight reading, because again, if you can hear how it sounds, then you're reading your notes, but you can also rely a little bit on your ear to help you get through the passage or the piece that you're sight reading as well. So work on ear training. You can do that. There are apps. You can go on the computer, and there are music theory websites that will train you in hearing intervals and chords and scales. But those are, and then also just pick out pieces by ear and get really good at playing by ear. You want to understand that you're going to miss notes. You're going to miss rhythm. When you sight read, pat yourself on the back if it's perfectly done, because it will happen. You can do it, but it's not going to happen all the time. So you have to learn to ignore wrong notes, ignore wrong rhythm, just keep going, make yourself keep going, and just chalk it up as it's something I'm going to keep working on. And lastly, you want to have a pretty good understanding of fingering. So again, this is where your technical studies will come into play. Practice your scales, practice your chords, practice your sevenths, do arpeggios. Hanon has a bunch of exercises in it that are very good. Etudes by Czerny are also very good. Some of the Chopin etudes are good for arpeggios and things like that. But you want to have those things in your fingers so that you have the fingerings and the basic skills down to play those passages, because usually those type of things that show up in music will be fast. So if you've practiced your technical studies, you should be able to sight read that and have the fingering down. As far as other fingering, there are times where you won't really have time to work out a perfect fingering, but you should be able to make decisions on the fly and decide, if I use this fingering here, then I can do this up here. You want to set yourself up for success as much as you can with fingering, because wrong fingering can actually inhibit your sight reading skills more than actually knowing the notes. So be comfortable with fingering, get good at fingering, understand the fingering principles and how they work so that it doesn't obstruct your sight reading skills. And the last thing I encourage people to do, if you're not a student and studying with a teacher, I make my students do sight reading regularly, even my advanced students. But if you're just kind of studying on your own, or you want to strengthen your sight reading skills, then do a 30-day challenge and do sight reading every day for 30 days. And maybe take some notes or do a video. Record a video of your sight reading skills at the beginning. Go through a 30-day challenge and then record yourself at that 30-day mark and see how much you've improved. I think you'll be surprised. Really, the whole method of getting good at sight reading is taking the principles that I gave you in these 2 videos and applying them. You must practice it and apply it every day to get better at sight reading. And it is possible to become a good sight reader. It's not just luck. Those of us who can sight read, it wasn't just, oh, we just are good at it. No, we practiced it. So practice it for 30 days and maybe set a goal. I want to become good at 4-part harmony, or I want to get better at rhythm, or my goal is to get from this level to another level, and just set some goals and just start practicing it every day. All right, that wraps up this video. So those are 2 videos on sight reading for piano. These things can apply to stringed instruments as well, with violin and viola. I'll make another video on that because there are a few differences. But anyway, I hope this helps.